Tonight, we're going to travel together, not to a castle, not to a battlefield, not to a medieval hall lit by torchlight and the smell of pine resin burning low in iron sconces. Tonight, we are going to travel somewhere a little closer in time, but no less vivid, no less layered with human story and human longing. We're going to 1960s America, and more specifically, we're going to the world of the working woman, the secretary who arrived early and left late, the nurse who walked the long linoleum corridor at 2 a.m, the school teacher who prepared her lessons by lamplight, the factory worker whose hands knew the shape of her station long before her mind had fully woken, the woman who punched a clock, filed a form, answered a phone, stitched a seam or served a table, and did it day after day, year after year, in a world that told her, quietly but insistently, that her work was temporary, that she would marry and stop, that she would have children and stop, that she was, in some essential way, just passing through. She was not just passing through. If you enjoy listening to sleep stories like this one, please consider subscribing. I post new stories every week, and there is always another world waiting for you here. Now, let us begin. The alarm clock sits on the nightstand like a small, faithful sentinel. It is round and cream-coloured, with 2 brass bells on the top and a tiny hammer that will strike between them with startling authority at 5:45 in the morning. It sits beside a glass of water and a small framed photograph, a mother perhaps, or a sister, and a tube of hand cream with the cap left off, because there was not quite enough time last night to put it back properly. The room is quiet. Outside, the city is beginning its first tentative stirrings. A garbage truck somewhere in the distance, its hydraulic groan rising and falling like something breathing, and the far-off sound of a train, the low moan of it crossing a bridge over still water. But in this room, for this one last moment, there is stillness. The woman who lives here is named Margaret. She's 26 years old. She has brown hair that she sets in pin curls every Sunday evening, a habit she learned from her mother, who learned it from hers. She has long fingers, good for typing, and she types 72 words per minute on a good day, 68 on a day when the coffee is slow coming, or her supervisor is watching. She has a small apartment on the 3rd floor of a building in Chicago, not far from the Loop, with a radiator that knocks in the night and a window that looks out onto a fire escape, and, beyond that, a narrow alley where cats sometimes congregate with the seriousness of a town council. She moved here 3 years ago from a small town in Wisconsin. She told her parents she was going to take a secretarial course and find a good position and save a little money, and someday she would settle down properly. Her mother had nodded and helped her pack. Her father had driven her to the bus station and given her $20 in a white envelope and told her to write when she could. She has written every Sunday without fail. But now the alarm is about to ring, and Margaret is already half awake. She usually is, just before it goes off, her body having learned the rhythm of its own obligation, and she reaches out and silences it before the bells can fully express themselves, and she lies still for one more moment listening to the city beginning, and then she sits up. This is how the morning begins. She moves through her apartment with the practiced economy of a woman who has learned to do more than one thing at a time in a space smaller than her childhood bedroom. The kettle goes on. She opens the bathroom cabinet, finds her toothbrush, finds the apana, brushes with the efficient focus of someone who has 17 minutes to get ready and not a moment more. The mirror above the sink is slightly tilted. She has never gotten around to fixing it. And so she sees herself at a slight angle, her face composed and calm, the face of a woman with a plan for the day. She does have a plan. It is written in a small notebook she keeps on the nightstand, the same notebook where she records her budgets and her grocery lists and occasional fragments of things she has read that struck her as worth keeping. The plan for today is, arrive by 8:15, finish the Morrison report before lunch, call the printer about the invoices, remind Mr. Harlow about his 3 o'clock, and, if there is any time at all, take a proper lunch break instead of eating a sandwich at her desk while fielding phone calls. This last item is underlined twice. She does not expect to accomplish it. Outside, the light is still grey and early, the particular grey of a Chicago morning in October, where the sky and the buildings and the streets all seem to be made of the same material, some kind of heavy, beautiful pewter that catches the light in unexpected places. The chrome trim of a parked car, the glass face of a shop window, the puddle from last night's rain that holds the reflection of a streetlight like a small, contained moon. Margaret walks to the L station with her coat buttoned and her hat pinned at the angle her mother always approved of. Not rakish, not too proper, just exactly right. And her leather purse hanging at her shoulder, and her lunch in a brown paper bag because the diner near the office charges 40 cents for a ham and cheese, and she is saving for a new winter coat, and 40 cents is 40 cents. The platform is already populated. There are other women here, other Margarets, different names, different apartments, different small notebooks with different plans, but the same early hour and the same composed faces, and the same shoes chosen for durability over style, or sometimes for both, because a woman who works on her feet all day knows that the choice of shoes is not a trivial thing, it is a moral question. They do not all know each other, these women. But they share something, here on this platform in the early morning, something that does not quite have a name, a kind of common understanding, a quiet solidarity of the purposeful. They're going somewhere. They have places to be. The city is going to run today in part because of what they are about to do. The train comes with a rush of metallic air. They board. Across town, in a different neighbourhood, a woman named Dolores is also beginning her morning, but hers begins earlier and differently. Dolores is 31. She has 3 children, ages 8, 6 and 4, and she works the early shift at the textile mill on the west side, the shift that starts at 6 and ends at 2, which means she's up at 4:30 to get the children fed, and the oldest one ready for school, and the younger too settled with her neighbour Mrs. Andrade, who watches them until school time for $2 a week, which is a bargain and a gift, and a relationship Dolores tends with great care. Her morning is a choreography. The baby, who is not quite a baby anymore, wakes when she does, has always woken when she does, as if connected by an invisible thread. And she brings him into the kitchen and gives him a piece of bread to hold while she starts the oatmeal. The older 2 follow in their various states of wakefulness. The oldest already anxious about a spelling test, the middle one dreamy and slow, needing 3 separate reminders to put on his shoes. She packs their lunches in bread bags, labels each one in careful block letters. She braids her daughter's hair in the 2 minutes it takes the oatmeal to cool. She has a gift for parallel processes, for holding multiple threads of attention simultaneously, without dropping any of them. It is a gift she has always had, that her mother had before her, that women in her family have exercised so constantly and so invisibly, that it has never been recognised as a gift at all. It has simply been called getting on with it, getting through the morning, managing. She leaves for the mill before the sun is fully up. She walks 6 blocks to the bus stop. She does not have a car. Cars are for later when the children are older and she has saved more. And she stands in the blue light of early morning and watches the neighbourhood wake up around her. The lights coming on in windows, the smell of coffee from somewhere, the sound of someone's radio finding its signal through the static. The bus arrives. She sits beside a woman from the mill whom she knows by sight but not by name, and they nod to each other in the way of people who share a route, and the bus carries them through the city, past the neighbourhoods that are waking and the ones that are still sleeping, past the school that her daughter will walk to in a couple of hours, past the church where she goes on Sundays when she's not too tired, past the small grocery where she shops on Fridays, past all the geography of her ordinary life, and then they are at the mill. The mill. It is a large, low brick building from the turn of the century, solid and unlovely, with high windows that admit a hard, flat light, and a smell that you carry home in your hair and your clothes and that your children have long since stopped commenting on, because it is simply the smell that their mother brings with her, the smell of the place where their food comes from, the smell of necessity. She finds her station, she puts on her smock, she begins. And in a third part of the city, in a neighbourhood of wide boulevards and large apartment buildings with doormen and polished brass fixtures, a woman named Helen is also beginning her morning, but her morning looks different again, as different from Margaret's and Dolores's as one world can be from another while still being contained within the same city, the same decade, the same century. Helen is 44. She's a registered nurse, and she works the overnight shift at a large hospital not far from Lakeshore Drive, which means that when Margaret and Dolores are waking up to begin their days, Helen is ending hers, walking the last 100 yards to her building through the cool October air, her feet aching in the way that they always ache after 12 hours on linoleum, the particular bone-deep ache that is different from any other kind of tired. She lets herself in. The doorman nods. He knows her schedule. He has a son studying at Northwestern, and she has given him advice about the boy's persistent cough, and the doorman is grateful in the quiet, permanent way of men who have received something important for nothing. She takes the elevator to the 7th floor. She changes out of her uniform in the bathroom carefully, one piece at a time, and hangs it on the back of the door. She splashes water on her face. She looks at herself in the mirror, the good, large mirror of a bathroom in a proper apartment, not a tilted one above a small sink, and she sees the lines around her eyes that were not there a decade ago, and she regards them without judgment, the way you regard the weather. It is simply what the world is doing. She makes tea. She sits by the window with it and watches the lake, which is doing its October thing, which is being very large and very silver and very serious, the way the Great Lakes always seem serious in October, as though they are thinking about something they are not yet ready to discuss. Helen has been a nurse for 22 years. She has seen things that would floor you. She has held hands and watched monitors, and done what could be done and accepted what could not, and she has driven home from her shift on 100 nights and sat by 100 windows with 100 cups of tea, and she has not once, regretted what she chose. This was her choice. Even now, even in the hospital where the nursing supervisor is a man who knows less than she does and is paid more, and where the doctors address her as __quote _0__ rather than by her name, even though she has known some of them for 15 years, and where the forms she's required to fill out multiply every year like something left untended. Even now, it is her choice. She finishes her tea. She draws the curtains against the morning sun. She sleeps. 3 women, 3 mornings, 3 versions of the same city. The same era, the same question, posed differently by each life. What does it mean to work? What does it mean to show up day after day and give what you have? These are the questions we will carry with us tonight as we move through this world, gently, slowly, with no rush and no urgency, just the steady, unhurried attention of someone who understands that the details of ordinary life, looked at closely enough, contain everything. Everything worth knowing, everything worth keeping. Breathe in, breathe out. We have all the time in the world. The office where Margaret works is on the 14th floor of a building downtown. It is a building of the kind that was very modern when it was built, in 1948, with clean lines and a lobby of pale marble and elevator doors that open with a satisfying weight and close with a sound like a thought being completed. The firm occupies 3 floors, accounting on 12, senior partners on 13, and the main office floor, where Margaret and the other secretaries work, on 14. She arrives at 8:12. She hangs her coat on the hook behind the door. She puts her lunch in the small refrigerator in the break room, where there is also a percolator that takes 7 minutes to produce its first cup. She straightens the papers on her desk, an L-shaped expanse of metal and linoleum that she has made as personal as the rules allow, with a small framed picture of Lake Michigan at the corner near her typewriter, and a coffee mug that says World's Best Secretary in blue letters, a gift from a previous supervisor who has since retired to Florida. She feeds a fresh sheet of paper into the Underwood. The Underwood is a typewriter of the 1950s model, black and substantial, the kind of machine that looks like it means business, and sounds like it too. Each keystroke a small, decisive percussion, the carriage return a satisfying sweep and a bell at the end. Margaret can type on this machine the way a pianist plays scales, without thinking, with a fluid accuracy that comes not from effort but from the long training of repetition. She has typed this machine's particular landscape into her muscles. She knows the slight stiffness of the G key, the way the R responds better if you come at it from slightly above, the little skip that the margin release sometimes does on cold mornings. She knows this machine the way you know a colleague of long acquaintance, its habits, its moods, its small, reliable eccentricities. The office fills gradually. The other secretaries arrive, Patricia, who is 23 and recently engaged and talks about her fiancé with a frequency that functions as a kind of weather. Constance, who is 37 and has worked here for 12 years and has a laugh that seems to originate somewhere below her ribcage, and Beverly, who is 51 and keeps peppermints in her desk drawer and knows where every file ever filed has been filed, and could, if asked, locate any document from any year back to 1954 in under 4 minutes. They are good at their jobs. All of them are very good at their jobs. This is not a thing that is frequently noted. It is noted in the way that the functioning of the heating system is noted, which is to say, it is not noticed at all until it stops working. But if you were to come to this office and watch them through a morning, really watch, with attention, the way an anthropologist watches a culture they are trying to understand, you would see something remarkable. You would see the invisible architecture of competence. Margaret is on the phone before 9. She has already taken 4 calls, 3 of them for Mr. Harlow, 1 of them for Mr. Peterson, who is never in before 9:30, and who she has told this to already twice this week. But the caller always sounds surprised, and she has typed 2 pages of the Morrison report and pulled the Glendale file for Constance, and fielded a question from a man on the 12th floor who is looking for a particular form that she knows is in the B cabinet on 13, but she directs him to it without impatience, the way you direct someone who is lost. She's a traffic controller. She's a memory system. She's a diplomat. None of these are the words her job title uses. Her job title says Secretary 2, Grade 4. She makes $62 a week, which in 1963 is a reasonable wage for a woman in her position. Which is the phrase that is used, a reasonable wage for a woman in her position. The phrase doing its quiet work of locating her within a framework of what women are paid and what they are paid it for, and the careful distinction between that and what men in equivalent roles are paid, which is more, which has always been more, which is understood to be the natural order of things in the way that the weather is understood to be the natural order of things. She does not spend much time thinking about this, not because she hasn't noticed. She has noticed in the particular way you notice something that is everywhere around you, something that shapes the landscape so completely that to name it feels like naming gravity. But because she has a report to finish and a lunch to eat at her desk, and thinking about it will not change it, and may make it harder to do the work, she does the work. In another office 3 blocks away, in a building that smells of carbon paper and ambition, a woman named Ruth is having a morning that is both similar to Margaret's and entirely different from it. Ruth is 34. She's a junior copywriter at an advertising agency, a position she arrived at by a route that is not entirely conventional. She started as a secretary, as most women in the agency did, and then spent 5 years writing copy in her spare time and submitting it to her supervisor through channels that she had to invent because there were no established channels for a secretary to submit copy. And finally, a client liked a line she'd written for a cereal campaign, liked it so much that he asked to meet the person behind it, and her supervisor, in a moment of either honesty or calculation, had admitted it was Ruth. That was 2 years ago. She's a junior copywriter now. She has a desk in the bullpen, alongside the other junior copywriters, who are all men, and who treat her with a range of responses that spans from professional courtesy to bafflement to a low-grade hostility that she has learned to navigate the way you navigate difficult terrain, carefully, without drawing unnecessary attention to the navigation itself. She is good at this. She is, in fact, better at the navigation than most people will ever know, because the whole art of it is to make it invisible, to arrive at the meeting, to make the point, to leave the room, to have the work seen and acknowledged without triggering the particular resistance that comes when certain kinds of men feel that certain kinds of women are becoming visible too quickly. It is a delicate calibration. She's been calibrating it for 2 years. This morning she's working on a campaign for a washing machine. The brief says, housewives. The target audience is housewives. The image they want is a woman in a bright kitchen, gleaming appliances, easy smile. Ruth has written and discarded 4 versions of the headline because each one feels slightly untrue, slightly like a costume that doesn't fit quite right, and she's trying to find the version that is honest enough to ring clear without being honest enough to alarm anyone. She understands this work. She understands it because she is, in some sense, both the writer and the subject. She understands the kitchens and the smiling and the particular brightness that is expected, and she understands it precisely because she is a woman in 1963, and the whole culture has been conducting an ongoing negotiation with her about what she is supposed to want. She writes a new headline, she reads it, she crosses it out, she tries again. Down the hall, in the glass-walled office of the creative director, a man named Frank is reviewing campaign boards with a team of 3 men. Frank is a good creative director in many respects. He has a good eye, a genuine instinct for what will land, a nose for what the market is ready for. He has not thought very much about Ruth. He knows she is there. He knows she wrote the serial line. He has a general sense that she is useful. He has not thought much about what it cost her to get there, or what it will cost her to go further. This is not unusual. This is, in 1963, simply how most offices work. And yet there is something happening, just beneath the surface of all of it. Something that will not become visible for several more years, will not be named until the later part of the decade, will not become policy or law for longer still, but which is there, in rooms like this one, in women like Ruth, in the careful calibrations and the quiet persistence and the work that keeps being done and being done and being done. Let us not rush ahead to it. Let us stay here, in this morning, in these offices, and simply watch the work being done. There is something restful in its way about watching competent people work. The sound of keys on a typewriter, the rhythm of it, the small bell at the end of each line, the scratch of a pen on paper, the sound of pages turning, the distant murmur of phones and conversations, and the city going about its business outside the glass. In the hospital across town, on the orthopedic ward, a nurse named Sandra is doing something that requires more concentration than any of the office workers' mornings. She's changing the dressing on a wound that has not been healing well, working with the careful, deliberate hands of someone who has been trained to manage pain, someone else's pain, with authority and compassion simultaneously. Sandra is 28. She graduated from nursing school in 1957 and has been on this ward for 4 years. She is the kind of nurse that patients ask for, not the most senior, not the most technically expert, but the one who makes people feel that they are being seen, actually seen, and not merely processed. She makes a small adjustment to the dressing. She speaks quietly to the patient, a man in his 60s who had a bad fall from a ladder, who has been in this ward for 2 weeks and is itching to go home, who has a wife and 3 grandchildren and a vegetable garden that he is worried about. She has heard about the vegetable garden several times. She asks about the tomatoes. His face changes. The tight-held expression of someone in pain opening slightly. A small window, enough for a little light to come through. He talks about the tomatoes. She listens, her hands still working, the dressing secure now, her hands gentling into the final steps of the process. She charts the details in the notebook at the end of his bed. She moves to the next patient. This is what the morning looks like, in 100 different rooms, in 100 different offices and wards and classrooms and back rooms of shops. Women moving through the day with the particular grace of people who are good at what they do and who are doing it anyway, regardless of what the world has said about the relative importance of their doing it. The morning moves. The sun climbs above the buildings and sends long rectangles of light across linoleum floors and marble lobbies, and the bare wooden desks of schoolrooms where other women, teachers, are writing the day's lessons on blackboards in clear, careful script, the chalk making a soft sound like distant applause. The city hums, the day takes shape, and somewhere in it, in all of it, there is the enormous, patient, almost invisible labour of women who have decided, each in their own way, each for their own reasons, to show up and do the work. Let that image stay with you for a moment. All those hands, all that quiet, determined, ordinary effort, let it rest behind your eyes like a good memory. Breathe in, breathe out. The morning is passing into something gentler now. The textile mill where Dolores works is a place of noise and repetition, and the particular smell that the industrial washing of cloth produces, a warm, slightly astringent smell. Not unpleasant, but inescapable, the smell that goes home with you and inhabits your pillowcase, and is, in some fundamental way, the smell of the work. She's at her station by 6:03. Her station is one of a row of machines along the west wall of the mill's main floor, large industrial looms that produce a plain cotton weave for institutional clients, hospitals mostly, the fabric of bed linens and towels and the particular utilitarian cloth that ends up in the places where bodies rest and are tended. There is a kind of circuit in this that Dolores has thought about occasionally. She produces the fabric that makes the linens that are on the beds in the hospital, where women like Helen work, where people in difficulty are cared for. The supply chain of ordinary life, connecting her hands to a patient's recovery without either party ever knowing the connection. She feeds the thread. This is the first task of the day, threading the machine, checking the shuttle, ensuring the tension is correct. She does this by feel more than sight. Her hands knowing the machine as a pianist knows the keyboard, the tactile information flowing directly from fingers to decision, without the detour of conscious thought. The machine starts. The sound of a textile floor in operation is a wall of sound, not quite noise in the unpleasant sense. It has a rhythm to it, a regularity that the body adapts to, that becomes, after months and years, simply the sound of work, the way rain becomes the sound of rain and the radiator becomes the sound of the apartment at night. She works. The work requires less thought than an observer might assume, but more attention. The difference between thought and attention is important. Thought requires the active deployment of the mind's analytical capacity, the deliberate construction of argument and conclusion. Attention is something quieter, more diffuse, a readiness, a state of receptivity to the signals that the machine and the thread are sending. She maintains this attention without effort, the way you maintain balance, not by thinking about it, but by being in it. But the work also requires the body, entirely and continuously. This is different from the office work, where the body is largely stationary, where the physical engagement is concentrated in the hands and the eyes, where the rest of the body sits in the background and endures. On the mill floor, the body is the tool, standing, moving, bending, the small constant adjustments of posture that are made 1,000 times a day without consciousness and that accumulate over years in the joints and the muscles and the particular territories of persistent ache that older workers carry. The standing mostly. You stand at the loom for the full shift, except for the 2 breaks and the 30-minute lunch. You stand on a concrete floor covered with thin rubber matting that was new in 1958 and has long since lost the resilience that made it kinder than the concrete. You stand, and your feet know it by 10 in the morning, and your back knows it by noon, and by 2 o'clock the standing is a presence in the room alongside you, a companion you would rather not have. Dolores is 31. She's been standing on this floor for 7 years. Her back on a bad day is a detailed, specific record of those 7 years. It speaks to her in the language of inflammation and pressure, and the particular sharp note that sounds when she lifts something wrong, which she has learned not to do but does sometimes when she is tired, when the protective attention slips. She does not complain about this. Complaining would not change it. The conditions are what they are, shaped by the economics of the industry and the priorities of management and the negotiated agreements of the union, which has won some things and not won others, which will win more things as the decade progresses, but which in 1963 has not yet won a concrete floor that is more than a year old. She has a strategy for the standing. It is not a complicated strategy. It is simply the strategy of movement, of shifting weight and adjusting position with sufficient regularity that no single part of the body bears the full load for long. She has learned this from the older women on the floor, the ones who have been standing here for 15 or 20 years, and who are repositories of practical knowledge about how to do this work without destroying yourself in the doing of it. The transmission of this knowledge is informal. It happens in the break room and in the glances and small adjustments that experienced workers make visible to newer ones. It is a kind of apprenticeship in durability, in sustainability, in the art of continuing. Dolores has also learned, over 7 years, the social ecology of the floor, who you can trust and who you cannot, who will have your back if there is a problem with a supervisor and who will not, who is in difficulty and might need covering for, and who will cover for you when you need it. And you will need it. Everyone needs it occasionally. The child sick in the night and the exhaustion real, and the ability to maintain the attention on the machine slightly below its optimal level. And on those days you need someone watching. She has people watching. She is one of the people watching. This is the unwritten social contract of the floor. The mutual aid of people who share conditions, who understand each other's vulnerabilities, and respond to them with a practicality that is not warm in the sentimental sense but is warm in the truest sense. It is responsive. It is reliable. It is there. There is a woman named Gloria who works 3 stations over from Dolores. Gloria is 47. She has 6 children. She has worked at this mill for 20 years. She is, by any reckoning, one of the fastest and most accurate workers on this floor. Her output is consistently above quota. Her error rate is the lowest in the section. And she has been passed over for the section leader role twice, both times in favour of men with less experience. She knows this. She does not express bitterness about it exactly. She expresses something more like a weary expertise in the way things are, the expertise of someone who has accumulated enough evidence to have formed a precise and accurate view of the subject, without finding much comfort in the accuracy. She and Dolores talk at break. They talk about the children, first. This is always first. The children are always first. The children are the reason for the standing on the concrete floor, and the 7 years of accumulated back knowledge, and the careful management of the body's resources. The children are the point. They talk about the union meeting that Dolores has decided to attend. Gloria has been to many union meetings. She knows Esther, has known her for years, regards her with the particular respect she reserves for people who act on what they believe. Go, she tells Dolores, you should go. She says it with the tone of someone transferring something, not just advice, but a kind of permission. A recognition that attending the meeting is a meaningful act and that the meaning deserves acknowledgement. Dolores nods. She will go. The break ends. They return to their stations. The looms resume their sound. The afternoon moves forward. The body endures. This is the factory floor. This is the work that does not have a clean desk or a window or a particular quality of afternoon light. It has its own textures, the warmth of the machines, the weight of the material passing through the hands, the rhythm that becomes almost musical when the floor is running well, all the machines in sync, the sound organizing itself into something that is almost a pattern. There is a beauty in it, if you look for it. Dolores looks for it sometimes, not always. Some days the beauty is not available, the body is too tired and the day too long, and the children's needs too immediate and the arithmetic of the week too narrow. Some days it is just the standing. But some days there is a quality to the afternoon light coming through the high windows, the thin, angled light of late October, falling in shafts through the dust motes of the factory air. And she watches it for a moment between adjustments, and there is something in it, something that is not nothing. She returns to the machine, she works, the looms run. The October afternoon deepens outside the high windows, unobserved by the women inside who are inside and working, and whose afternoon is its own season, the season of the floor, the season of the hands and the standing, and the endurance that will end at 2 o'clock and then begin again tomorrow. This is the work. This is also the work. Let it rest gently in you. Let the sound of the machines become something soft, something regular, something that is almost like breathing. The breath of a great building full of people doing what needs doing. Breathe in. Breathe out. The floor runs. There is a sheet of paper in a filing cabinet on the 12th floor of Margaret's building. It is not a dramatic document. It does not look like something that matters. It is a pale blue form with small black type and a grid of numbers, and it contains, in that grid, the salary of every employee in the firm, from the senior partners at the top to the cleaning staff who come in at 6 in the evening. And if you were to look at this form, which Margaret has not seen, which none of the secretaries have seen, which would be considered a private matter of the firm's internal business, you would find something that would, at first glance, perhaps strike you as odd. The male administrative assistant on the 13th floor, a man named Collins who has been with the firm for 18 months, and whom Margaret has occasionally helped with his typing when he fell behind, earns $78 a week. Margaret earns 62. Collins types 55 words per minute. Margaret types 72. This is not a document that anyone is hiding precisely. It simply exists, as these documents exist, as part of the ordinary machinery of the workplace, which reflects the ordinary machinery of the world. A woman in 1963 earns, on average, 59 cents for every dollar a man earns in a comparable role. The gap narrows or widens depending on the industry, the region, the particular whims and habits of individual managers, but it is there, everywhere, a background hum in the financial lives of working women. It has always been there. There are reasons given for it, the kind of reasons that were given in 1963 with great confidence and complete conviction. Women will leave when they marry. Women will leave when they have children. Women are supplemental earners. Their income is extra, a contribution to a household that is primarily supported by a husband. Women do not need the same income because they do not have the same financial obligations. These reasons are given about women generally, which means they are given about every individual woman regardless of her actual circumstances, regardless of whether she is single or widowed, or the primary support of her family, or someone who has chosen not to marry, or someone who intends to work for her entire career. The reasons are applied to all of them equally. Dolores, at the textile mill, has heard these reasons explained to her in various forms by various supervisors, and she nods when they are explained, the way you nod when someone tells you something you already know, the careful nod that does not invite further elaboration. She nods, and she goes back to her station, and she works. She has 3 children. She's the primary support of her household. Her husband left 4 years ago. She does not explain these things to her supervisors when they explain the reasons to her, because she has long since determined that explaining them is unlikely to change anything and is certain to complicate things, and she cannot afford to complicate things. She simply works harder. She's the best worker on her line. Her supervisor, a stocky man named Kowalski, who has been running this section for 9 years, knows she is the best worker on his line. He tells her this, occasionally, with a gruffness that is itself a form of respect. He gives her the harder assignments, the ones that require greater precision, greater speed. He trusts her with the newer machines. He does not pay her more. There is no mechanism for him to pay her more within the structure of the mill's wage system, a system organized by job classification, by seniority, by a dozen variables that do not include the quality of the work. And within that system, the job classifications are themselves organized along lines that were established when the mill was founded, in the early part of the century, and which were established in ways that placed the roles most commonly held by women at the lower end of the wage scale. It is a system built on assumptions. The assumptions are old. They are so old that they do not feel like assumptions anymore. They feel like facts. In Margaret's office, the rules are different, unwritten but equally felt. They are the rules of the professional office, which has its own taxonomy of acceptable and unacceptable. There are things that a secretary does, and things that a secretary does not do, and the line between them is maintained with a vigilance that can be difficult to explain to someone who did not live it. A secretary types, a secretary files, a secretary answers the phone and screens calls and organises schedules and takes minutes and manages the small domestic needs of the office. The ordering of supplies, the arrangement of flowers for important meetings, the remembering of birthdays and anniversaries of wives and children, and the making of reservations at restaurants. A secretary is, in many ways, the operational memory of the enterprise. A secretary does not write the report, she types it. She may have caught 3 factual errors in the Morrison report this morning, and she did. She noticed them, and she corrected them quietly, because that is what she does. That is what Beverly and Constance and Patricia do. They correct the errors and type the corrected versions and send the clean document up to the 14th floor, and it goes out under Mr. Harlowe's name, and he reads it with satisfaction, and perhaps thinks he is quite good at this, and she will type the corrected version and send it up, and that will be that. She does not expect a different outcome. She is not in this moment in 1963 bitter about it. She has a more complex relationship with it than bitterness. She is a woman in her time, shaped by her time, with the expectations and accommodations her time has given her. She's also smart enough, has always been smart enough, to see the shape of the thing, even if she cannot name it precisely, even if the language for naming it does not quite exist yet. The language is coming, but it is not here yet. The rules extend beyond wages and work classifications. They extend into the physical and social architecture of the workplace. There are rules about how a woman is addressed, and how she addresses others. There are rules about how she dresses. The skirt below the knee, the blouse with a collar, the hat if she's going to a client meeting, the shoes with a heel but not too high a heel that suggests professionalism without suggesting anything else. There are rules about how she holds herself in a room, where she sits, when she speaks. In meetings, she does not generally speak. She takes notes. She brings coffee. She is sometimes, often, the most knowledgeable person in the room about the operational details being discussed, and she sits with her notepad and her pencil, and she takes down the words of the men who know somewhat less about those details, and she does not offer the correction that is forming in her mind, because the correction, if offered, would not be received as a contribution. It would be received as something else, something that does not have a polite name, something that would make the morning harder. She keeps the correction for later. She uses it when the mistake surfaces and someone needs to fix it quickly, and then she fixes it quickly and smoothly, and Mr. Harlowe says, "Good Lord, where would we be without you, Margaret?" And she smiles and means it, and also mean something else simultaneously, in the way that you can mean two things at once when one of them has no proper place to go. Ruth, in the advertising agency, navigates a slightly different but equally real set of constraints. She has crossed a line. She's in the creative space now. She writes copy. She's supposed to have ideas. And this creates an interesting problem, because the expectation is that she can cross this particular threshold while remaining somehow essentially in her original place, helpful and supporting and unthreatening. Her ideas offered with the appropriate diffidence. Her successes held lightly. Her failures held appropriately. She has learned the phrasing. I was thinking it might be possible to maybe try something along these lines. Just a thought, just a starting point. Obviously the group will know better than I do, but what if we tried something like this? This phrasing is a technology. She has developed it with great precision, the way you develop any tool that you depend on. It gets her ideas into the room without triggering the reflexive dismissal that direct assertion sometimes triggers. It is not dishonest. She does believe in collaborative development. She does want the group's response. But the hedging, the softening, the care taken not to claim ownership of the idea too quickly, that is a calculation, a professional survival mechanism deployed daily in a workplace that has not yet decided what to do with her. She does not resent it exactly. Or she does, but distantly, the way you resent something so familiar it has become part of the furniture. She's been doing it so long that she does it almost automatically. And sometimes, in the early evening when she's on the train home, and the day is loosening its hold a little, she lets herself think about what it would be like to simply say, here is the idea, it is good, here is why. Just that. No hedging, no softening, no careful management of the room's response before the idea has even been heard. Someday, not yet. On the paediatric ward at the hospital, a nurse named Carol is dealing with a different set of rules entirely. The rules here are more explicit, written in policy manuals, enforced by nursing supervisors, codified in a structure that was designed a century ago by people who had very specific ideas about what nurses were and what they were for. Nurses were women. That was nearly always true, or nearly always assumed, the exceptions being notable enough to be remarked upon. Nurses were women, and they served doctors, and the relationship between the nurse and the doctor was the relationship between skilled assistance and authority, the nurse's skill being recognised, indeed essential, but the authority residing elsewhere. Carol knows more about the children on her ward than the doctors who visit twice a day and write the orders. She knows which child cries in the night and which one goes quiet, which is more alarming. She knows which mother is reliable and which one needs extra support. She knows which medications the kids on her ward have had bad reactions to, and which ones go down easy and which ones need to be crushed and mixed with applesauce, or they will not go down at all. This knowledge is not formally recognised. It is not on a form. It does not change her pay grade. It does not give her the authority to modify an order, even when she knows from experience, from observation, from the accumulated data of 4 years on this ward, that the order is not optimal. She calls the doctor. This is the mechanism. She calls the doctor and she says, "Doctor, I noticed that Jimmy has been running a low-grade fever since we started the new medication. I wanted to bring it to your attention." And the doctor says, "Thank you, nurse," and either acts on the information or doesn't, and Carol charts the fever and the conversation and continues her round. She does not say, "I think we should change the dosage," even when she thinks they should change the dosage, even when she's right about the dosage, and the doctor eventually changes it, and the child improves. She says, "I noticed. I wanted to bring it to your attention." This is a kind of translation. She is translating her expertise into a form that the system can receive. A form that does not challenge the hierarchy, but does introduce the information. It is what she's been trained to do, what generations of nurses have been trained to do, a professional practice so deeply embedded that it has its own name, the doctor-nurse game. You give the suggestion without appearing to give it. You influence the decision without appearing to make it. And you act on what you know, and you do it within the constraints of a system that officially does not allow you to know what you know. This takes an enormous amount of skill. It is not recognised as skill, it is recognised as good nursing. Outside, the day is deepening. The October sun is lower now, its light more golden, slanting through windows at a long angle that falls across desks and files and the hands of women working. All those hands, All that knowledge, held quietly, used carefully, never quite fully claimed. The afternoon is beginning. Let the quiet come. Let the day settle. Let the weight of all that careful, invisible effort dissolve into something softer now. You are doing well. Breathe in. Breathe out. Rest with the thought of all those ordinary women doing extraordinary things in ordinary rooms, and let that image hold you gently as we move forward into the afternoon. Dorothy arrives at her classroom at 7:40 in the morning, which is 20 minutes before she needs to, and 40 minutes before the first child arrives, and she uses these 40 minutes the way a craftsman uses the time before the first customer of the day, to arrange the tools to make the space ready, to bring herself into the work through the act of preparation. She is a craftsman of something. The word that would be used is teacher, and teacher is correct but somehow insufficient. Insufficient in the way that a word can be correct, and still not quite fill the space of the thing it is naming. What she is, more precisely, is a creator of conditions. She creates conditions in which 23 children, most of them 10 years old, some of them 9, 2 of them 11, can discover that they are capable of things they did not previously know they were capable of. This is the actual work, not the facts taught, not the curriculum covered, not the standardized material that comes down through the district, the approved reading list and the arithmetic sequence and the science unit on weather that she will do in February. These are the scaffolding. The actual work is the condition creation. She moves through the room. She adjusts the seating arrangement. She has changed it twice this week and is considering a third adjustment, a change to the cluster arrangement that has been working well, but that has put Tommy and James in proximity in a way that she thinks may be more distracting than productive for both of them. She stands in the middle of the room and thinks about it, the way a director thinks about staging. She moves Tommy 3 seats over. She regards this. She moves him back. She will think about it more during the first period. The classroom is hers in a way that few spaces in a woman's life in 1963 are hers. The apartment is hers if she lives alone. The kitchen, arguably, in the domestic arrangement, though the kitchen has a complicated relationship with ownership and labour that makes it not quite simply hers, but the classroom, from 7:40 in the morning until 3 in the afternoon, on every school day from September to June, is her jurisdiction. She runs it the way she believes a classroom should be run. She's thought hard about this. She was trained in a normal school, a teacher's college, the traditional preparation, 2 years of pedagogical theory and practice teaching. And she has been teaching for 5 years, and in those 5 years her ideas about what a classroom should be have become more specific, more certain, more her own. She believes that children should be asked questions more than they are told facts. She believes that 10-year-olds have more going on inside them than the curriculum acknowledges, and that if you treat them as people capable of complexity and genuine thought, they will, most of the time, demonstrate that they are. She believes that boredom is the great enemy, not disorder, not noise, not even difficulty, but the particular deadness of a child who has concluded that what is happening in school has nothing to do with anything real. She believes in reading. She believes in it with an intensity that is almost religious. The specific conviction that the child who reads well has a certain kind of freedom that cannot be taken away, a portable world they can enter regardless of external circumstances. She has organised the corner near the window as a reading corner. 3 low chairs, a bookshelf she selected herself, a rug she brought from home because the linoleum is cold and she wanted something warmer. The children know this corner. They love this corner. The first children arrive at 8:20. They come in 2s and 3s noisily, with the accumulated energy of the night's rest and the morning's trajectory not yet directed toward anything in particular. They find their seats. They compare notes on whatever the urgent social business of the moment is. There is always urgent social business. There is always something happening in the complex social world of a 5th grade classroom. And Dorothy lets them settle for 2 minutes before she begins, because the 2 minutes of settling are part of the process, and rushing them wastes time rather than saving it. At 8:22 she begins. She has a habit of beginning each day with what she calls a thinking question, a question that is not about the curriculum, or not directly about it, but about something that the curriculum is trying to teach them to think about. Today's question is, if you could only keep 5 things from our entire classroom, which 5 things would you choose? Hands go up. The discussion that follows is a small demonstration of exactly the kind of thing Dorothy believes in. The children are thinking, actually thinking, using the material at hand to argue, to reason, to consider each other's perspectives and modify their own. She does not direct them. She asks questions that extend their thinking or complicate it. She is not the answer, she is the prompt. 20 minutes into this discussion, the thinking question has generated a conversation about what matters and what is necessary, and what you would do without the things you thought you needed. And this is going somewhere that might connect to the unit on colonial American life they're about to begin, in which what mattered and what was necessary were very different from what is assumed now. She had not planned this connection. She sees it forming. She guides them toward it gently, barely perceptibly, a slight pressure on the wheel. They arrive at it. The pleasure on their faces is the pleasure of arrival, the feeling of getting somewhere under your own power, which is a different pleasure from being carried there, and which Dorothy believes is the pleasure that creates the love of learning. She's good at this. She's very good at this. She's paid $61 a week. The starting salary for a male teacher in this district is $68. She has not been told this directly. She found it out the way women in 1963 find out most of the things they are not supposed to know. Indirectly, through inference, through conversation, through the particular alertness of someone who has learned to read the room. The first year she found out, she was upset in a way she kept to herself. The second year she brought it to the district personnel office, where a man named Henderson heard her out with the patient expression of a man who has heard similar conversations before and has a prepared response to them. The response was, women teachers have lower attrition rates, the investment in their training yields better returns over time, the salary structure reflects the different professional trajectories that are typical. It was a polished response. It was not a satisfying response. She said, I would like to be paid the same as a male teacher with equivalent experience and performance. Henderson said, I understand, and I will take note of that. She said, thank you. She went back to her classroom. She's still being paid $61 a week. She has not stopped thinking about it. She's also, and this is important, not consumed by it. She is consumed by the children. She is consumed by the reading corner and the thinking questions and the Tommy and James seating problem, and the girl named Alice who writes about nurses with such clarity and care. She teaches. She teaches as if the teaching is the main thing, because it is. It is the main thing. The other things, the salary question, the male vice principal who sometimes comes into her room and observes her as though he is evaluating rather than learning, the parents who occasionally respond to her with a reserve that they do not give the male teachers. These are the conditions in which she works, not the work itself. She has made this distinction clearly and she maintains it clearly. The work itself is what happens in this room with these 23 children. The work itself is magnificent. At 3 p.m, when the last child has gone and the room is quiet again, she stands in the centre of it. The same centre she stood in this morning, adjusting the seating, regarding the arrangement. And she feels what she always feels at this hour, a combination of tiredness and a specific kind of satisfaction that does not have a simpler name. The satisfaction of having done the thing, of having spent the day in the actual work, of having been, for these hours, fully present in the thing that matters. She picks up her bag, she picks up the stack of papers to grade, she goes home, she'll be back tomorrow, she's always back tomorrow. The particular discipline of this is not glamorous. There is no dramatic arc. There is simply the consistency of someone who believes in the work and does it day after day, year after year, building something in the minds of children that she will never fully see, a foundation, a set of habits, a way of asking questions that will carry them through decades she will not witness. This is the work. This is what teachers do. In schoolrooms like this one, in cities and towns across the country, there are 250,000 women teaching, shaping, attending, creating the conditions. They earn less than the men in their profession. They are supervised frequently by men who were once taught by women. Their professional status is recognized in some quarters and condescended to in others. They keep teaching. The children keep learning. The foundation keeps being built. Let us honor this. Let us hold the image of that room, the reading corner, the low chairs, the bookshelf, the rug that Dorothy brought from home, and let it be a symbol of something. Something worth recognizing, something worth keeping. Breathe in. Let the image of the classroom rest in you. Breathe out. Gently, gently. Let us pause for a moment and simply listen. Not to a story exactly, not to a narrative moving forward in time. Let us simply listen to the sounds that surround these lives. The ambient texture of a city in 1963, the sonic world in which the working day is embedded, the sounds that provide the background against which everything else is happening. Close your eyes if you haven't already. The city begins early, and it begins with trucks. The delivery trucks, mostly. The bakery trucks and the laundry trucks and the dairy trucks, the ones that move through the streets in the pre-dawn hours when the city belongs to the workers who supply it, whose day begins before anyone else's. These trucks have a particular sound: the engine idle, the creak of the vehicle settling, the bang of the rear door, footsteps on concrete, the sound of crates and boxes and metal dollies, the brief exchange of words between the driver and the person receiving the delivery, and then the truck moving on. This sound is the sound of the city feeding itself. Then the garbage trucks, a little later, the hydraulic compression, the grinding, the particular mechanical weight of a system designed to swallow and process the debris of daily life. Not a pleasant sound, but a necessary one, and the men who make it are doing something essential, carrying away what the city produces in surplus, making room for more. The delivery trucks and the garbage trucks, and then, as the light comes, the first commuters. Footsteps on sidewalks have a particular quality in the early morning that is different from midday footsteps. More deliberate, more focused, the purposeful tread of people who know where they're going and are going there directly. The sound of leather heels on the pavement, the occasional tap of a woman's shoe with a small heel, the heavier sound of men's work boots, and under all of it the constant ambient bass note of the city. The traffic on the major streets, the distant mechanical processes of the infrastructure, the hum of the electrical systems that run everything, then the eel, the elevated train that cuts through the neighbourhoods, the particular shriek and clatter of the cars on the track, the rush of displaced air as the train passes, the pause at the station and the sound of the doors, the heavy pneumatic clunk, the brief gap of relative quiet, and then the acceleration, the sound diminishing into the distance as the train carries its load toward the loop. Inside the L, a whole other sound world. The conversation of commuters, conducted at the slightly elevated volume that the train noise requires, and the peculiar privacy of a public conversation held in a loud space. You can say things on the L that you would not say in a quiet room because the noise provides a kind of cover, a plausible deniability of having been overheard. Women commuters in particular have perfected the L conversation, the quick exchange, the complete communication in the brief moment between stops, the entire emotional landscape of a friendship navigated in the 10-minute ride from Belmont to the Loop. The office buildings, once you enter them, have their own sound. The lobby marble and the elevator doors, a sound of substance, of weight, of a building that was meant to last. The elevator itself, the hum of the cable and the machinery, the slight lurch at each floor, the ping of the indicator. Then the floor, the particular sound of a large office in operation, which is a composite sound, hard to break down into parts but impossible to mistake for anything else. Typewriters mostly. This is the dominant sound of the 1963 office, the percussion of it, the irregular rhythm of different operators at different speeds, the carriage returns, the bells. A room of typewriters at work sounds something like rain, if rain had structure, if rain had intentionality, if rain were producing something. Phones. The phones of 1963 ring with a particular authority, not the thin electronic sound of later decades, but a proper bell, a clear and carrying sound that means something is happening, that someone is trying to reach someone, that the connection between one human being and another is being attempted. Paper. The sound of paper is underestimated. In a 1963 office, it is constant, the sound of sheets being fed into typewriters, pulled from them, stacked, filed, shuffled, clipped together. The soft sound of a file being returned to a drawer. The particular thud of a large stack of documents being set on a desk, and beneath all of it, the ventilation system, a continuous, barely audible hiss, the sound of the building breathing, the climate control that keeps the inside of the building at a temperature that is different from the weather outside, and that is, in 1963, still a relatively modern luxury, not taken entirely for granted. These are the sounds of Margaret's day. Different sounds fill Dolores's day. The mill has a sound environment that is, by any objective measure, too loud. Louder than the regulations of the time required, but loud enough that, over the years, Dolores has noticed a diminishing in her hearing in the upper registers, a small and permanent adjustment to the sound world that the mill has made in her. The machines run at a frequency that, after months, becomes inaudible in the sense that it becomes interior. You no longer hear it as something separate from yourself. It becomes part of your body's experience, part of the vibration of the day. When you leave at 2, the absence of the sound is almost shocking. The world outside the mill seeming unnaturally quiet, the traffic and the voices and the ambient sounds of the street muffled and strange. You readjust. By the time you get to the bus stop, the world has returned to its normal volume. But inside the mill, the machines, the material, the voices of the women raised to carry above the sound, the occasional metallic complaint of something requiring adjustment. This is the sonic texture of 8 hours of labour, and it shapes the body as surely as the standing shapes it. The sound entering through the ears and vibrating in the chest, a physical presence. At the hospital, the sounds are a language. Helen has learned this language over 22 years. The sounds of the ward communicate information, and you listen with the part of your attention that is always listening, the part that runs underneath whatever you are doing, ready to interpret. A specific kind of sound means someone needs attention. A different sound means a piece of equipment is behaving incorrectly. The absence of a sound can mean something. The sounds of the city at night, which Helen knows better than she knows the day sounds, have their own character. The traffic reduced to the occasional car, the buses running less frequently, the particular quality of a city quieting down, while a third of its population sleeps and another third works in the dark and the remaining third is somewhere in between, wakeful or restless, or simply not yet ready to close the day. She walks home through this sound, the click of her own shoes on the pavement. Very audible now in the quiet. The sound of a bar closing somewhere, voices spilling out briefly and then swallowed by the closing door. The distant sound of the lake, which you cannot quite hear this far from the water, but which is there in the imagination if you know it is there. The elevator, the key in the lock. The particular quality of her own apartment in the very early morning, which is a sound of a life. The refrigerator cycling, the radiator settling, the building's own quiet infrastructure ticking and adjusting. She sets down her bag. She fills the kettle. She listens to the city outside the window, which is as quiet as it gets, which is not very quiet but is quiet enough, which is the sound of a city that is always, at some level, running. Listen to it now. All of it together, the typewriters and the loom and the school bell and the eel and the footsteps on concrete and the hospital at 2 in the morning and the kettle filling. All the sounds of a world in motion. All those lives vibrating at their particular frequencies. Listen, and let the sounds grow softer now. Let them retreat into the distance. Let the room grow quiet. Breathe in, the softest sound, your own breath. Breathe out, quiet. At 12:15, something shifts in the office. It is a subtle shift, not a full stop, not a collapse of the morning's momentum, but a slackening, a loosening of the particular tension that keeps the morning in motion. The phones still ring, but with less urgency. The typewriters pause, then start again, then pause more. Someone opens a window somewhere and the smell of the street comes in. Exhaust and bakery bread and the particular composite smell of a city at noon that is not quite any single thing but is unmistakably lunch. Margaret eats at her desk. She had intended not to. She has underlined it in her notebook, that intention. A proper lunch break, away from the desk, ideally somewhere with actual light. But Mr. Harlow has a brief from a new client and he needs the outline by 2, and while he has not asked her to give up her lunch for it, he would not ask directly. He simply explained the situation with the rueful expression of a man whose need is genuine, and whose gratitude will be expressed in the form of a slightly smaller version of the same rueful gratitude the following month. She has read the situation accurately and made the calculation, and is now eating her ham and cheese sandwich with one hand and feeding a new sheet of paper into the Underwood with the other. The sandwich is good. She made it this morning with good bread from the bakery near her building, and the mustard she likes, the grainy kind that is slightly sharp. She eats it slowly, which is her one small concession to the theory of a proper break. She could eat it in 4 bites, but she does not. She eats it slowly and looks out the window at the rectangle of sky visible between two buildings, a sky that is doing its October best. Pale blue with a few high thin clouds moving steadily from west to east in what feels like purposeful direction. She finishes the sandwich. She finishes the outline. It is 1:47. She gets up and stretches, 2 full stretches from the base of her spine, the way her mother always told her to. Good posture is a form of self-respect, her mother said, a phrase that Margaret has thought about more than her mother probably intended. She walks to the break room and pours herself a coffee and stands at the window for 4 minutes, looking down at the street below where the lunch crowd is beginning to thin, people returning to their buildings with a slightly reluctant step of the afternoon re-entry. 4 minutes. Then she goes back to the desk. This is the lunch hour. It is hers in theory and the office's in practice, and she has long since stopped fighting this. Has found her peace with it in the 4 minutes at the break room window and the slowly eaten sandwich, and the specific small pleasure of the good mustard. You find what you can find. You hold what you can hold. Across town, in a different kind of lunch, Beverly and Constance from the office are at a counter diner 2 blocks away, seated on swivel stools that have been there since 1951 and have a particular comfortable give to them, like old shoes. They come here 3 days a week when they can, and they eat tuna melts or the soup of the day and they talk. This is the part that matters. This is the reason for the diner and the stools and the slightly too strong coffee. They talk. Beverly is 51. She's worked for the firm for 12 years. She was widowed at 42 and raised her son alone and put him through 2 years of college, which he left voluntarily, and which she has largely made her peace with. She has a small apartment in Lincoln Park and a cat named Dolly, and a sister in St. Louis whom she visits twice a year. She is, by any reckoning, a person who has gotten through things and come out the other side of them intact. She is funny. This is perhaps the most important thing about her. She is genuinely wickedly funny, with a gift for the dry observation that can make Constance laugh until she has to dab her eyes with her paper napkin and tell Beverly to stop. She means it. She cannot laugh any more, and then Beverly says one more thing and they both lose it again. This is important. This is not trivial. The lunch break, the counter diner, the tuna melt and the too strong coffee and the laughter, these are not footnotes to the working life. They are part of it, a necessary part, the part that makes the rest sustainable. The solidarity of shared experience, the relief of naming the unnameable in a place where no one can hear, the simple restoration of being known. Constance is 37. She is never married and does not particularly intend to, though she does not say this loudly. She grew up in a small town in Indiana and came to Chicago on her own at 22, and has built a life here that is, in its way, exactly what she wanted. Her own apartment, a neighbourhood she knows, a job she's good at, a city large enough to contain her without defining her. She tells Beverly about something that happened this morning. One of the junior men from accounting, a new one not there a month yet, walked up to her desk and asked her to make copies of a document for him. She was not his secretary. She was not anyone's secretary, in the sense of being assigned to him specifically. She was the secretary for the senior partner on the 14th-floor side, a separate matter entirely. She had looked at him. He had looked back at her, with the particular expression of someone who has not yet understood that a thing he expected to be simple is about to be more complicated. She said, very pleasantly, "I'd be happy to point you toward the copy room." He blinked. She pointed. He went. Beverly nods. She has heard variations of this story many times in many forms. She has stories of her own, filed away over 12 years, a catalogue of these small daily negotiations, the man who speaks to your general direction rather than your face, the client who directs his question to the junior partner rather than to you, even though you have just explained the answer, the meeting where you have provided the documentation that is now being discussed without any acknowledgement that you provided it, a catalogue. You do not always open it. Sometimes you open it in the diner, over tuna melts, with someone who knows what it contains, and you read out a few entries together, and you laugh, because if you did not laugh you would have to do something else, something that would be harder to live with. You laugh. You drink the too strong coffee, you go back. But these lunches are a kind of resistance. Not the organised, named, publicly visible resistance that will come later in the decade, the marches and the manifestos and the raised fists and the burning of things. This is the older, quieter form of resistance, the maintenance of self, the refusal to let the daily diminishments diminish you all the way, the choosing, again and again, to remain intact. Beverly has been choosing this for 12 years, Constance for 15. Margaret, still at her desk with her 4-minute window break, is learning it. In another part of the city, Dolores's lunch is also 30 minutes, taken in the mill's break room at a metal table with 4 women she has worked beside for years. There is a particular texture to this lunch, different from the diner lunch of the office workers. Louder, more physical. The conversation punctuated by the sound of the mill on the other side of the wall, the machines that have been running since 6 and will run until 2. She eats what she brought. She talks about her children with a woman named Ida, who has children of similar ages and who lives 3 streets over and who is one of the people Dolores trusts, in the specific tested way you trust someone who has proved their trustworthiness over years of small occasions. Ida is one of the people who knows about Dolores's situation, the husband gone, the 3 children, the $2 a week to Mrs. Andrade, and who does not treat her with pity, which Dolores has long since established she cannot stand, but with a matter-of-fact practical regard that is worth more than pity by any measure. What does she need? What can be done? These are Ida's questions, not questions about feelings or regrets or what went wrong with the marriage. Practical questions. What does she need and what can be done? Dolores eats her lunch and feels the 30 minutes as what it is, a small gift, a pocket of time that belongs more or less to herself before she goes back in. On the orthopedic ward, Helen is sleeping. She's been sleeping since 8 in the morning, the deep, drugged sleep of someone who has been awake all night. Not drugged literally, just the body's own chemistry, the shutdown of a system that has been running hard and finally has permission to stop. She sleeps with the reliability of someone who has learned to sleep well, regardless of the hour, regardless of the noise, the particular medical-grade curtain of concentration that nurses develop, because the alternative is not resting, and not resting is not an option when you have a 12-hour shift again tomorrow night. Outside her window, the lake is still doing its October thing. She is not watching it. She is asleep. The afternoon light will come to her window eventually, slant across her curtains, and she will wake in the early evening and make herself something to eat and sit by the window for a little while before she needs to begin again. This is her daily cycle. Inverted from the rest of the cities, but just as regular, just as ordered, the same rhythm of effort and rest that everyone requires. She dreams. She dreams about a ward, but not this ward, a gentler ward, a brighter one, with large windows and plants on the windowsills and enough staff that no one has to run, and a system in which her knowledge and judgment and the 22 years she has given to this work are not merely received as a useful adjunct to authority, but are recognized as authority themselves. It is a good dream. She turns in her sleep. Somewhere in the city, in a quiet room above a school, a teacher named Dorothy is eating her lunch alone at her desk, grading papers while she eats, a habit she has tried to break and has not successfully broken. She's 29. She teaches 5th grade. She teaches reading and spelling and a little arithmetic and a great deal of social studies, which she loves, in which she teaches her children about the world they live in and the people in it and the choices people make and the consequences of those choices. She loves her students. She loves them with the professional passion of someone who believes that what she's doing matters enormously, that the classroom is where the world is made, or not made, where children learn what they are capable of and what the world expects of them, and that the teacher is, in this, a crucial hinge. She grades a paper on community helpers. One of her students, a girl named Alice, who is small and precise and ferociously neat, has written about nurses. She has written that nurses help sick people feel better, and that they are very important, and that she wants to be a nurse when she grows up. Dorothy smiles. She writes at the top of the paper, "Wonderful, Alice. Very clear writing." She puts it in the good pile. She takes a bite of her apple. The lunch hour is ending. Let it linger for a moment longer. Let these rooms and these tables and these windows and these women stay still just a little while more. There is something beautiful in the ordinary noon, something worth holding. Hold it. Breathe in. Let the afternoon come slowly. In 1963, the expectation was so pervasive that it had the quality of weather. The expectation was, you will marry. It was not always said directly. Often it did not need to be said at all. It was built into the architecture of the social world, expressed in the questions asked and not asked, in the congratulations offered when an engagement was announced, in the slightly different quality of the silence when one was not announced to a woman past the age of 23 or 24. It was expressed in forms. Employment forms, insurance forms, tax forms. The paperwork of adult life in 1963 organised the world around the assumption of the married household as the default unit, with the man as head of household and the woman as dependent, and a working woman who was single found herself in filling out these forms, navigating around the shape of an assumption that had been built into the structure without her input. Patricia, one of the secretaries in Margaret's office, is engaged. She's been engaged for 6 weeks and has the particular quality of someone for whom the future has resolved into a clear and beautiful image. She and Robert, an apartment in the north side, eventually a house, eventually children, a life that matches the template of what a life is supposed to be. She is happy. Her happiness is genuine. It is not a performance of happiness, and it is not a response to external pressure. She loves Robert, and she wants to marry Robert, and the life she imagines with him is the life she wants. This is worth saying because there is sometimes, in the telling of this history, a tendency to elide it, to make all the marriages into constraints, all the women into people who are conforming rather than choosing, all the choices into pressures rather than desires. Some of them were choosing. Patricia is choosing. And yet, even in Patricia's choosing, there are the unexamined things. She has been asked by her supervisor when she is planning to leave, not if, when. This is the assumption encoded in the question. She will marry Robert and she will leave, because that is what women who marry do, and the firm's planning needs to account for her departure. He is not asking to be cruel. He is asking because it is a reasonable operational question, and because the answer will be yes, she will leave. That is what she expects, what she intends, what seems to her simply the next chapter. She said probably spring next year, maybe summer. She said it with a smile, she meant it. And yet there is, somewhere in Patricia, a small note of something, not quite doubt, not quite reluctance, more like a question that she has not fully asked herself yet, that has not been given room to form fully, that exists only as a faint quality of uncertainty in the corners of her happiness. What will she do, after the apartment and the setting up of the household and the initial completeness of the new life? With the part of her that types 71 words a minute and knows the Morrison file and fielded 14 calls on Wednesday without losing her place. She has not asked this question. She will ask it later. In 1963, later is later. It is not now. It does not need to be now. There are more immediate and pleasurable things to attend to. But the question is there. It is always there, even when it is not being asked. Constance, who is 37 and unmarried and intends to remain so, has a different relationship with the expectation. She has been accommodating it, that is the right word, for 15 years. Accommodating it in the sense of creating space for it in her life without being controlled by it. She does not feel its absence as a wound. She genuinely does not. She has examined this carefully over the years, with the scrupulous honesty she applies to most things, and she is satisfied that the life she's built is the life she wants, and that the template she did not follow was not the right template for her. But accommodating the expectation is a tax too. It is the tax of the explaining. Not always explaining directly. Sometimes it is the deciding not to explain, the choice to let the slight embarrassment of others wash past without engaging with it. The Thanksgiving tables and the family questions and the colleagues who periodically mention men they know, men they think Constance might like, men for whom her good qualities are a kind of argument for their introduction into her life. She deflects. She is skilled at deflecting. She has made the deflection so smooth and practiced that it barely registers as deflection anymore. It is simply part of the texture of social interaction. A minor and manageable element of navigating the world as the person she is. She would not call it painful. It is simply the cost of being herself in a world that expected someone slightly different. In the mill, in the south wing where the cutting and finishing is done, a woman named Rosaria is in a situation that the expectation has not prepared her for. She is 28 and she married at 20, and her husband became ill 2 years ago. A serious illness, chronic, the kind that does not improve and does not end and that rearranges everything, the whole financial and emotional structure of a life, around its continuing demands. She is the breadwinner. She has been the breadwinner for 2 years, and she will be the breadwinner for the foreseeable future, and the template of her life, the one she was handed, the one she planned for, the one in which she would work for a few years and then be supported. That template has been replaced by a different one. One that nobody gave her a map for. She learned to read the new map on her feet. She got faster at the cutting tables. She picked up extra hours when they were available. She manages the household finances with a precision she did not have before, a precision born of necessity, of knowing that there is no margin and that the margin is her responsibility. She is not bitter. She is tired, and she's sometimes afraid. The particular afraid of someone whose safety net has been removed and who knows very clearly what falling would mean. But she is not bitter. She is practical. She is also, she has noticed, more direct than she used to be. She used to be the kind of woman who soft-pedaled, who asked rather than said, who took the long route around a difficult conversation. Now she does not have time for the long route. Now she says what needs to be said and asks what needs to be asked, and navigates what needs to be navigated directly. Because the alternative is a longer road that she cannot afford. The experience has given her something. She would not have chosen the way it was given to her, but she has it now, and she intends to keep it. This is a thing that happens in the lives of women in this era and all eras. The unexpected circumstances that require new capacities, and the new capacities that outlast the circumstances that required them. The women who were widowed and had to manage. The women whose marriages dissolved and who had to build. The women who never married and learned the particular independence of the self-sufficient. The women whose plans were interrupted and who discovered, in the interruption, something about what they were capable of. Not that difficulty is good, not that hardship is a gift. These are not easy lessons, and the price of them is real. But the capacity that comes from having navigated something hard, that is real too. And it is worth naming alongside the cost. The afternoon light in the mill is richer now, more golden. The particular quality of late October afternoon that is different from the morning light. More angled, more precious. The light of a season that knows it will not last. Rosaria finishes her section. She starts the next one. She works with the speed and accuracy of someone who has learned, over 2 years, to have exactly what she needs, and nothing she doesn't. Outside, the world is full of choices and constraints and the complex space between them where most lives actually happen. Most lives happen in the between. In the between, women are making their way. Let that be enough for now. Let the between be recognized as a real place. Let us rest in it for a moment, not hurrying toward any conclusion, just being in the complex, ordinary, dignified middle of things. Breathe in, breathe out. The afternoon holds. In the middle of the afternoon, when the coffee has worn off a little, and the morning's momentum has been spent and the evening is not yet close enough to provide its own pull, there is a particular quality to the light in offices. It is the quality of endurance, the particular quality of people who have already done a great deal, and who have more still to do and who are doing it anyway, not with heroism but with the ordinary, unspectacular commitment that is the actual texture of most human endeavour, not the dramatic arc of the story, but the long middle section that is mostly just continuing. Margaret is proofreading. She has been proofreading the Morrison report for 40 minutes. It is 16 pages. She has found 4 errors, 3 typographical and 1 factual, the factual error being a percentage that someone has transposed, that she recognised as transposed because she has a memory for numbers, and has read the underlying data twice this week. She has flagged all 4 with a small neat pencil mark in the margin, and set the pages aside for Mr. Harlowe's review. She has also, while proofreading, been thinking. This is something she does in the interstices of work, in the spaces between one task and the next. She thinks, and the thinking is not separate from the work, it is woven through it, the way certain colours are woven through a fabric. She has been thinking about the junior position that was posted last week. The firm posted it on the internal board, a junior analyst position, administrative but with some research responsibilities, a step up from the secretarial track. It pays $85 a week. Margaret noticed it immediately. She has been doing the equivalent of this work, the research aspects of it, the analysis, as a supplement to her secretarial duties for the last 2 years, not asked to, simply doing it because it needed to be done, and she is the one who sees when things need to be done. She looked at the requirements, she meets them, she has considered applying, she has thought about this consideration carefully, with the same careful thought she brings to everything. The applications go to the personnel department, to a man named Griggs whom she has met twice at company events, and who has a way of talking to women that is not offensive in any definable way, but that somehow manages to communicate that the substance of what they're saying is not quite fully landing, as though it is coming through a medium that adds a light fuzz to the signal. She has heard that the last time a woman applied for this kind of position, she doesn't know the details, Beverly mentioned it obliquely, it didn't go well, she hasn't decided yet. She picks up the Morrison report. She carries it to Mr. Harlow's office. He's on the phone. He holds up one finger, the universal gesture of a man on the phone, and she sets the report on his desk and turns to go, and he covers the receiver and says, "Quickly, good work today, Margaret," and she says thank you, and she means it, and she returns to her desk. She sits. She feeds a new sheet of paper into the Underwood. The junior analyst position stays in the back of her mind, where the thinking can continue without requiring a decision. The invisible ceiling. This is not a phrase that people use in 1963. It will not be coined for another 2 decades, will not become part of the common language until a different era has accumulated enough evidence to need a name for it. But the thing itself exists in 1963. In Margaret's building, and in Ruth's agency, and in Carol's hospital, and in Dorothy's school board, and in 100,000 other institutions across the country. It exists in the way that a ceiling exists in a room, not something you think about when you're standing in the middle of the room, but something that becomes evident when you start to move upward, when you reach for something higher and find resistance where you expected air. Ruth has been reaching. She's been reaching for 2 years, carefully, methodically, with all the skill and patience she can bring to it. She's been reaching with her copy, writing it, improving it, entering it into the record with her name attached, gently but persistently. She has been reaching in meetings, offering something that involves a recognition of the differential cost of what they are both doing. He can move through this space without calculating it. She cannot. Every room she enters, she has calculated. Every meeting, every conversation with a senior person. The calculation is not a deficit. It has made her sharper, more prepared, more fluent in the unspoken languages of the workplace, but it is a tax. It is a tax that William does not pay, and that the men in the senior positions do not pay, and that most of them have never thought about. Not because they are bad men, but because a tax you don't pay is a tax you don't notice. Ruth has paid it every day for 2 years. She is not angry exactly. She is something more contained than anger. She is determined. In the hospital, Sandra has had a difficult afternoon. There is a child. She will not call the child by name, not even in her own thoughts about it, because she has learned to maintain a certain distance. Has learned this through experience. A child who came in this morning with a fever that has not responded to the first line of treatment, and the attending physician has ordered a second course, and Sandra has implemented the order, and she is watching. She is very good at watching. The watchers of the world, the nurses, the teachers, the mothers, the women who have learned to read rooms and faces and situations, they are doing a kind of labour that is not captured in any job description, but without which the systems they work within would not function. Attention is labour, sustained, skilled attention, the kind Sandra brings to this child and to all the children on this ward, the kind that registers a slight change in colour or breathing or expression, and files it alongside the chart data and the doctor's orders and produces, from all of that, an assessment, is labour of the highest order. It is not documented as such. It is called care. Care is important. Care is valued. Care is thanked at the end of long shifts by grateful parents with tired eyes. But it is not quite what skill is. It is not quite what expertise is. It is something that the culture of the hospital, the culture of the profession, the culture of 1963 America has placed in a different category, a category that is warm and essential, and somewhat below the line of the explicitly compensated. Sandra watches the child. She watches him closely. At 3:40 in the afternoon, she calls the attending physician. Her voice is calm and specific. She describes what she has observed. She uses the language of clinical observation. objective, precise, the language of medicine, which she has mastered and which she uses fluently, which is itself a kind of argument for the recognition she does not formally have. The physician comes, he agrees with her assessment, he modifies the treatment. She returns to the ward and does what needs to be done, and the child's fever begins slowly to respond. She does not think about the praise she will not receive for this. It is not a conscious withholding. It simply does not arise in the context. It did not arise because there is no mechanism for it to arise. The mechanism that exists is, doctor orders, nurse implements. In this case, the order was improved by the nurse's observation, but the improvement is located within the order, and the order belongs to the doctor. This is not done to her. It is simply how it is. There is a woman in a different department of the hospital, the administrative wing, named Louise, who is working on a problem of a different order. Louise is 48. She runs the billing department. She has 12 people working for her, 10 women and 2 men, and she's been running this department for 7 years, and she is good at it by any objective measure. Her error rate is the lowest in the hospital's history. Her processing times have improved every year. She has implemented 2 new systems that have saved the hospital significant administrative costs. She has been told 3 times that she's being considered for the Director of Administration role. She has not received the Director of Administration role. The Director of Administration role has been held in succession by 2 men whom Louise has trained. The first was there for 3 years before moving to a different hospital. The second has been there for 18 months and is, in Louise's professional estimation, not as good at the job as she is. She has not said this to anyone. She manages her department with the same precise competence she has always applied. She goes home in the evenings to a house in a suburb she chose carefully, where her husband works as an engineer, and their 2 children are doing well in school. She has a good life. She has made a good life. She's not sure whether to be proud of what she has made or angry at what she has not been given, or both at once or neither. She is mostly just continuing. There is wisdom in continuing. There is also something lost in it. Let us hold both of those things at once, the wisdom and the loss. As the afternoon deepens and the light begins to change, the quality of it shifting from the flat working light of the middle hours to the warmer, more angled light of late afternoon that falls across desks and floors and faces with a different tenderness. The afternoon is almost done. There is a specific beauty in the end of a long afternoon, when the bodies begin their slow return from the held positions of the day, and the minds, slightly loosened, start to think about the evening ahead. Margaret stretches her hands. 12 years of typing lives in her tendons, a mild stiffness in the right wrist that she manages with a nightly ritual of hot water and a specific exercise her mother taught her. She does not think of it as a complaint. She thinks of it as the cost of the work, the way a carpenter thinks about the calluses on his hands. The day is nearly done. She will go home. She will stop at the bakery for a small rye loaf, a slight luxury and a slight necessity, bread being one of the things she will not economize on. She will ride the L and read. She will eat dinner in her small kitchen. She will wash the dishes, watching the alley cats through the window. She will set her pin curls. She will write a letter to her parents. She will sleep, and she will wake tomorrow and do it again. There is a rhythm to this, a steadiness. Let it hold you. Let the afternoon light soften. Let the working day close. Breathe in, breathe out. There is still evening to come, and night, and rest, and we will get there together. There is a street in Chicago in 1963 where the weight is different. Not different in kind from what we have been describing. Not a different experience of the working world from what Margaret and Dorothy and Helen and Constance carry, but heavier, compounded. The same weight, plus another weight, the weight of gender plus the weight of race, carried simultaneously in a body that the world reads in 2 registers at once. This story cannot be told without this street. This story cannot be told truthfully without standing here, in this part of the city, among these women, and understanding that the experience of being a working woman in 1963 was not a single experience but a spectrum, and that the women at certain points on that spectrum carried more than others. Lucille is 29. She's a receptionist at a law office in the Loop. She's the first black woman to hold this position at this firm. She was hired because the firm's largest client made a comment, not a public comment, a private comment, the kind that gets made in the context of other business and carries its weight quietly into the room, about modernizing, about the changing city, about what a professional firm's front office should look like in 1963. She was hired. She's good at her job. She is, in fact, exceptional at her job. She has a facility for names, for remembering who someone is and making them feel remembered, a gift for the small social arts that make a professional environment comfortable, a voice on the phone that projects warmth and competence simultaneously. The partners have noted individually and collectively that the clients seem to like her. The clients who come through the front office and see her there behind the desk. Most of them do not react overtly. This is 1963 Chicago, not 1953 Mississippi. The reactions are subtler. The slight pause, the recalibration, the adjustment that happens in the first second of seeing her, that is over before it can be remarked upon, and that she has learned to read without appearing to read. She reads it every day, multiple times a day. She reads it and she does not let it show in her face, which maintains its warm and professional expression with a consistency that costs her something and that she has decided is worth the cost because the alternative, the visible acknowledgement of the constant small recalibrations, would cost her the job, and the job is what she is here for. She is good at her job. She wants to be recognized for being good at her job. These two things, the goodness at the job and the difficulty of being recognized for it, exist in constant, exhausting tension in her daily life. She navigates the tension. She navigates it with a fluency that is not natural. Nothing about this is natural. It is all acquired, learned in the hard school of having to learn it, but that has become, through the accumulation of days and months and years of practice, second nature. She has colleagues. There are other black women in this building, 3 of them, in the typing pool on the second floor, and they have, between them, the particular solidarity of people who share both the professional environment and the additional layer of navigation it requires. They eat lunch together on Tuesdays, in a diner 2 blocks over that is welcoming without making a production of it. They talk in the way that Constance and Beverly talk in their diner, directly, without the full hedging that the office requires, with the relief of being in a room where the calculation is suspended for an hour. They talk about work, and they talk about the specific work of being who they are at work, the work of the double navigation, the gender layer and the race layer, the way these interact with the particular personalities and attitudes of the people they work with. They are very funny. This is also worth saying. The humour in these conversations is sharp and specific and real. Humour is a technology of survival, and it is also a form of intelligence, and it is also sometimes just funny, genuinely funny, and these women are genuinely funny. The laughter in the diner on Tuesdays is a specific important thing. Across town in a different part of the city, a woman named Vera is working in a position that does not require the same front office navigation but carries its own weight. Vera is 37. She's a domestic worker. She's been working in white households in Chicago's North Shore suburbs for 14 years, taking 3 buses to get from her neighborhood to theirs, arriving at 7:30 and leaving at 4, cooking and cleaning and managing the household work of families who have the economic resources to employ her. She is invisible in these houses in a specific way. Not invisible in the way of the secretary who is not noticed in the meeting. That is one kind of invisibility, the invisibility of the underestimated. Vera is invisible in a different way. She is seen and not seen simultaneously, present and absent at once, her physical presence acknowledged. She is greeted, thanked, occasionally asked about herself, but her personhood somehow maintained at a slight remove, as though the full acknowledgement of it would complicate the arrangement. She has thought about this. She has thought about it carefully and arrived at an understanding of it that is not resigned, and is not angry in a way that consumes her, but is clear. She understands exactly what the arrangement is. She is not confused about it. What she is professional. She does excellent work. She does it with care and efficiency, and a standard of quality that the families she works for have come to rely on. She knows where everything is in each of the 3 households she rotates through. She knows the preferences and the routines and the small domestic requirements of each. She knows which mother in which house is having a difficult month and how to work around her without drawing attention to it. This knowledge is vast. It is not recognized as vast. It is recognized as good help. She is good help. She's also a complete person with a complete interior life and a complete set of her own concerns and interests and relationships and ambitions, all of which exist in the hours before 7:30 and after 4, in her own neighbourhood, in her own household, in her own life. The family she works for know something about this life. She has mentioned her children, her church, certain general outlines of her world, but they know the outline. They do not know the interior. She does not give them the interior. The interior is hers. This is a form of privacy that is also, in its way, a form of resistance, the maintenance of a self that is not fully available to the arrangements of the economic relationship. In 1963, the domestic workers of America, most of them black, most of them women, most of them working in conditions excluded from the labour protections that cover other workers, are largely outside the frame of the women's movement that is beginning to organise. The Friedan book, the Commission, the professional women's luncheons, these are for a different demographic, and the distance between them is not lost on Vera, or on Lucille, or on the 3 women in the typing pool who lunch on Tuesdays. The women's movement, when it arrives in its more organised form, will not fully serve them. It will serve some women better than others. This is a fact of the history. It is not a reason to abandon the full story, but it is a reason to tell the full story. To include these streets and these buses and these Diner Tuesdays in the accounting, to make sure the weight is counted accurately, the full weight, the compounded weight. Lucille is on the phone, she is warm and precise, and the client on the other end of the line, whoever he is having a good experience of the firm. She is creating that experience. She is good at her job. The afternoon is deepening. Let us hold this part of the story with care. Let us sit with the full weight of it. Not to despair. The story moves forward. The world changes. There are women in the decades ahead who will hold ground that Lucille and Vera and the Tuesday lunch women could not yet hold. There is movement. But first, here, the full weight, the full count. Breathe in. Breathe out. We hold them here, with us. In 1963, the working women we have been following moved through a world that was also moving around them. A world of large events and public arguments and changing landscapes. A world that was in the process of becoming something different from what it had been, even if that process was slow and uneven and often invisible in the middle of it. Let us take a moment to widen the frame. Let us look at the country they lived in, the decade they inhabited, the historical moment that their ordinary working days were embedded within. The year 1963 is, in the historical telling, a hinge year. It is the year before things changed very visibly, very publicly, very dramatically, before the Civil Rights Act and the free speech movement and the escalation in Vietnam and the cultural convulsions that would give the decade its reputation. It is the year when many of the conditions for those changes were in place, but the changes themselves had not yet fully arrived. The economy in 1963 is expanding. America in the early 1960s is in a period of sustained economic growth, the long boom of the post-war decades, when the productive capacity of the country and the buying power of its middle class are both rising and the general sense of trajectory is upward. There is unemployment, there is poverty, there is enormous inequality. The expansion is not touching everyone, but the general mood is one of forward motion, of confidence, of the expectation that next year will be better than this one. This mood is available unevenly, for women, for black Americans, for the immigrant communities in the factory neighbourhoods and the service districts. The expansion is real, but the access to it is constrained, structured by the same hierarchies and exclusions that have always constrained access. The rising tide is rising, but the boats are not all the same size, and some are in harbours that the tide reaches last. But the expansion is creating something else alongside its inequalities. It is creating labour demand. The post-war economy needs workers, and as it grows it needs more of them, and the women who were entering and re-entering the workforce in the late 1950s and early 1960s were in part responding to this demand, being pulled in by the economy's need, not only pushed in by necessity or desire. The jobs were there because the economy needed them filled, and the economy was slowly and imperfectly opening to women as a workforce because the alternative was leaving those jobs unfilled. This is the context in which Margaret types and Dolores weaves and Helen nurses and Dorothy teaches. They are not just individuals doing individual things, they are part of a demographic transformation. The transformation is also being registered in the political world. There is a Kennedy administration in Washington, and the Kennedy administration has a particular relationship with the image of change and progress, and the expanding possibility of American life. An administration that is modern in its self-presentation, that has cultivated the image of a country moving forward, that has included women in visible positions, not as many as would be just, but more than before and more visibly, that has commissioned the report on women's status, that has signalled, in the way that signals operate in political culture, that the question of women's equality is a legitimate question. The signal is not the same as the action, but the signal matters. It is heard by Ruth, who reads the newspapers. It is heard by Beverly, who has been paying attention to these things for 12 years. It is heard by the women at the professional luncheons, who are beginning to understand that the political climate may be more receptive than it was, and that this is a moment to be used. It is heard at a certain remove by Dolores, who is paying attention to what Esther is saying about the Union and the fair pay legislation and the political landscape in which the legislation might or might not be possible. The signal travels. In November of 1963, everything will change. We will not follow the narrative that far. We will stay in October, in the ordinary working days that are the texture of this story. But the November that is coming, the assassination, the national grief, the particular before and after that it will become in the memory of everyone alive at the time, that November is close, and its proximity is part of the atmosphere of October 1963, even for people who do not know it is close. There is a quality of the time, an intensity, something in the air. The civil rights movement is in its most active and visible phase. The March on Washington happened 6 weeks ago, in August. On a day of extraordinary weather and extraordinary words and a speech that entered the country's bloodstream in a way that speeches rarely do. The images from it are in the newspapers, on the television, in the conversations of the country. Lucille watched it on television. She watched it in the apartment of a neighbour, a gathering of 6 women from her building. And the room was quiet in a way that rooms are quiet when something is happening that is both enormously important and deeply personal. That is a public event that is also simultaneously a private one. She did not speak much. She watched. She thought about what she navigated every day at the law firm, and she thought about what she was watching, and she felt the distance between them and also the connection, the long, uneven, continuing work of insisting on recognition, on the right to be fully seen and fully counted in the life of the country. These things are connected. The civil rights work and the women's work and the labour work and the professional work, they are connected at the root. They are different expressions of the same fundamental argument, which is that the distribution of dignity and opportunity in American life is not just, and that the injustice is not an accident, and that the not accident can be addressed. Not quickly, not without cost, not without setback and frustration, and the long, middle distances where progress is invisible, but addressed. Margaret is thinking about the analyst position, Dolores is thinking about the union meeting, Ruth is writing a headline, Helen is making her round, Dorothy is explaining to Alice what a memoir is, and the country, outside their windows, is in motion. It is always in motion. The motion is sometimes visible and sometimes underground, sometimes dramatic and sometimes composed of so many ordinary acts that you cannot see the movement until you step back far enough to see where you were and where you are. Step back for a moment. See where these women are. They are here, in this city, in this October, doing the work. And in doing the work, they are part of the motion. Every day, every Tuesday, every shift. Let this be the thought that carries you now. The ordinary is not separate from the important. The ordinary is the important, accumulated. Breathe in. Hold this thought gently. Breathe out. Let it move with you into sleep. When the working day ends, something happens that is particular to women, and to this era, and in truth, to many eras, though it is 1963 and we are here. The work does not end. This is a thing that needs to be said clearly, even though it is said with the utmost gentleness. When these women left their offices and their wards and their factories and their classrooms, they came home to a second workplace, a domestic one, a second structure of obligation and skill and labour that was called, when it was called anything, housework, a word that does its best but fails to capture the breadth and complexity of what it contains. Let us follow a few of our women home. Margaret's apartment, when she opens the door at 6:15, is in the particular state it was in when she left it at 7:30 this morning. bed made, dishes washed, a thin coat of the city's dust on every horizontal surface. She puts down her bag and her coat and changes out of her work shoes. This first, always, the shoes. Her feet singing their relief, and she opens the refrigerator and assesses. She has some eggs. She has the rye bread from the bakery. She has half a head of cabbage and 3 carrots and some leftover chicken from Sunday. She stands at the open refrigerator in her stocking feet, and she plans the particular feminine arithmetic of what is in the kitchen and what the evening requires, and she reaches a conclusion and begins. The kitchen is small. It contains everything it needs to contain, and nothing more. A gas range, a refrigerator, a small counter with a mixing bowl on it, a rack where her pots hang with the orderliness of tools. She is comfortable here. Cooking for Margaret is not the same kind of work as the office work. It is a different register, quieter and more sensory, with the satisfaction of things being transformed, of raw ingredients becoming something with a smell and a warmth and a rightness to it. She makes a simple thing: eggs scrambled with the last of the chicken, toast from the rye loaf, the carrots roasted in the small oven. While she cooks, she listens to the radio. It is a news program which she follows with half her attention, and then a music program which she follows with more. She eats at her small table by the window, watching the alley grow dark, the cats arriving for their nightly council with the gravity of diplomats. After dinner, she washes the dishes. She does the laundry, 2 trips to the laundry room in the basement, where the machines cost 25 cents each, and she exchanges a nod with the woman from the second floor who is always there on Tuesdays. She irons her blouse for tomorrow. She sets her pin curls. She reads for 40 minutes, a library book, a novel set in France, which she is enjoying for the quality of its sentences and the way it makes Paris feel like a place where you might actually go if you made the right choices. She writes the letter to her parents. She makes a cup of tea. At 10:30 she turns off the light. The day has been 12 hours of work in 2 different locations, with a 4-minute break at a window and a sandwich eaten over a typewriter for restoration. This is not unusual. This is, in 1963, the ordinary shape of a working woman's day. Dolores's evening begins before she has finished the day. Her shift ends at 2 in the afternoon, which sounds like a gift, all those hours, except that the hours are already claimed before she reaches them. She collects the 2 younger children from Mrs. Andrade, who lives next door and who has given them a snack and let them watch half an hour of television, and she brings them home, and then she has a window, perhaps 45 minutes, perhaps an hour, before the oldest comes home from school, and in that window she does what needs to be done: the sweeping, the laundry if it's a laundry day, the beginning of dinner, the grocery run if it's needed. She's good at compressing time. She's had to become good at it. Dinner tonight is beans and rice, which costs almost nothing and takes 40 minutes, and which her children eat without complaint because they have learned not to complain about beans and rice. Because their mother's exhaustion is something they can read in the set of her shoulders even when she smiles at them, which she does. She always smiles at them, even when the day has been hard. The oldest, 8 years old, a serious boy named Thomas who has taken on a gravity that Dolores sometimes looks at with a mixture of pride and sadness, sets the table without being asked. He has done this since he was 6. She does not know exactly when he decided to do it, just that one day he was doing it, and she accepted this as the kind of help that you accept without excessive comment, because to comment would be to make something complicated out of something simple. She serves the beans. They eat. She tells them something from the day, a small thing, a funny thing when she can find one, and they tell her things from their day, the small social dramas of the primary school, the alliances and grievances and surprising events, and she listens with the particular quality of attention she reserves for them, the undivided kind, the kind that is not performing listening but actually listening, actually in the room. After dinner, dishes. Homework supervised. She sits at the table and works through Thomas's multiplication tables with him, then reads with the middle one, then does the small calming rituals of bedtime with the youngest, the stories and the glass of water, and the last question, and the final settling. By 8:30 all 3 children are in bed. Dolores sits in the small front room. She is deeply tired. Not the surface tired that a short sleep fixes. The deep tired of someone who has been running at capacity for a long time, the tire that has accumulated over months and years and that requires more than sleep to address, requires really a fundamental rebalancing of the equation, more rest against less labour, which is not available to her right now, not in any form she can take. She has learned to sit with this tired, to inhabit it without letting it consume her. She sews for a little while, she takes in mending, alterations for neighbours, 4 or 5 households, and it adds a few dollars each week, which is not nothing, is in fact the difference between a few things and without those few things. She sews at the kitchen table under the good light, and the sewing is the kind of work she can do in a state of deep tiredness, the hands knowing what to do, the mind able to float a little while the fingers work. She finishes a hem, she starts on a button. The radio is on low, a music programme, something with horns, something with a low swing to it that is almost like company. At 9:45 she turns off the kitchen light. She checks the children, one hand on each forehead in the dark, the gesture of a mother, the ancient gesture, and then she goes to bed. She's asleep in 4 minutes. Helen is beginning her shift. She arrives at the hospital at 7:45, 15 minutes before she needs to, which is her habit. She likes to get a full handover from the evening shift. Likes to know everything there is to know before the night takes on its own shape. She changes into her uniform in the locker room, exchanges a few words with the woman who's leaving, learns what she needs to know about the ward and the patients, and the 2 situations to watch closely. She begins her round. The ward at night is a different place than the ward in the day. The daytime ward is busy and purposeful, full of visitors and doctors and orderlies, and the various organised noise of a working medical floor. The night ward is quieter, most of the lights dimmed, the corridor empty, the sounds more intimate. The particular shallow breathing of the patient in room 6 who is sleeping badly, the muffled television from the family room at the end of the hall where a wife is keeping vigil. Helen moves through it with the particular movement of a nurse at night, unhurried but entirely purposeful, the sound of her shoes a deliberate soft heel-toe on the linoleum. A rhythm that the patients who are not sleeping know and take comfort from. The sound of someone awake, someone watching, someone who knows what she's doing and is doing it for them. She checks the patient in room 6. She adjusts something small and moves on. At 2 in the morning, which is the hardest hour, the hour when the body's own chemistry conspires with the dark and the quiet to create a heaviness that is difficult to resist, she makes herself a cup of tea in the nurse's station and does her charting. Her handwriting is excellent even at 2 in the morning. She was taught to write clearly and carefully. It was a requirement of the training. Legibility is a professional virtue. And this is a training that 22 years have made permanent. She drinks her tea. She thinks about nothing in particular. She listens to the ward. The second shift, the domestic one, does not exist for Helen in quite the same form it exists for Dolores and Margaret. Because Helen is unmarried and lives alone, and the domestic obligations of her life are hers alone to manage, which means they are manageable, organised around her schedule, not doubled and tripled and complicated by the needs of others. But she pays a different tax, the night shift tax, the inverted days, the body that runs against the city's rhythm, the social life that is perpetually in conflict with the sleep schedule, the holidays and Sundays and ordinary Tuesday evenings that she gives to the ward while the rest of the world gathers around tables and televisions and the ordinary pleasures of the ordinary evening. She chose this. She's still choosing it, every shift, every night. There is something in the night ward that she loves. She would not use that word to a colleague, but alone with her tea at 2 in the morning, she allows herself the word, the intimacy of it. The way the night strips away certain unnecessary layers and leaves the essential thing, a person in difficulty and a person with the skills to help. In the day, with all its bustle and hierarchy and paperwork and personalities, this can get obscured. At night, it is clear. She finishes her tea, she makes her round. Somewhere in a suburb east of the city, Dorothy, the 5th grade teacher, is sitting at the kitchen table of a house she shares with her husband, who is at this moment watching television in the front room, and she's grading the remaining papers from today's social studies assignment. Red pen, the soft scratch of it in the quiet kitchen. Her husband calls something to her from the front room, and she calls something back and returns to the papers. She'll be here for another hour. After that, she'll make his lunch for tomorrow and her own, and put them in the refrigerator. She'll wipe the counter and check that the coffee is ready to go in the morning, that it only needs to be turned on. She will go through the next day's lesson in her head. She does this every night, a mental run-through, like a musician running scales, and she will adjust where adjustment is needed. She will go to bed at 11:30, she will be up at 6. And tomorrow, in her classroom, 23 children will sit in rows and look at her, and she will be ready. She will always be ready. This is the second shift. It runs in millions of kitchens and living rooms, and at 1,000 nurses' stations, and in the small chairs beside children's beds across the country. It runs in the background of the national story, below the line of what gets measured or photographed or talked about or compensated, and it runs with a reliability that the structures above it have come to depend upon without quite knowing it. Let us honour it here. Let us sit with it for a moment, in the quiet. All those evening kitchens, all those kitchen tables, all those lamps, all the work being done in the gentlest, most ordinary light. Breathe in, breathe out, the night is coming. There are things women in 1963 do with the hours that are theirs, the hours after the work and before the sleep, that are not about the work and not about the preparing for more work, that are simply about the living of a life. Let us rest here for a little while in these hours. Let us follow them not to the office and not to the mill and not to the ward but to the other places, the ones that do not appear on any employment record, the ones that do not generate wages or output or measurable productivity, the ones that generate something else. Margaret on Saturdays takes the L to the Art Institute. She does this most Saturdays, weather permitting. She's been doing it since she moved to Chicago 3 years ago, a habit she started in the first months of the city, when she was still finding her bearings and needed somewhere to be alone without being lonely. The Art Institute suited her immediately, and has suited her ever since. She has particular paintings. Not the famous ones, or not only the famous ones, but the ones that have become hers through repeated looking, through the particular accumulation of standing in front of something many times, and finding that it continues to offer something new. There is a small Dutch interior she goes to always, a woman reading a letter by a window, a room of complete orderliness and quiet, the light from the window precise and beautiful and entirely sufficient. She stands in front of it and she thinks about the woman in the painting. She has thought about her many times. What is in the letter? What was the particular quality of that light on the day the painter saw it? What happened after? After the woman finished the letter? After the painter left the room? After the light moved and the day continued into the ordinary afternoon? These are not answerable questions. They are useful questions. She stands with them, at a respectful distance from the painting, and lets them work. This is what she does on Saturday mornings. Constance, on some evenings after work, goes to a class. It is a pottery class, held in the basement of a community centre 3 blocks from her apartment, on Wednesdays and Fridays. She started it 3 years ago, impulsively, because she walked past the community centre and saw a notice in the window, and walked in and asked, and there was still room in the session that was starting the following week. She's not especially good at it. She is competent. She can make a bowl now, a proper bowl that holds things, which was not possible in the beginning when everything she tried collapsed into the same kind of lopsided disaster. But she's not skillful in the way that some of the other students are, is not developing toward the kind of mastery that would make the work aesthetically interesting. She does not care. This is the revelation that pottery gave her, the discovery of an activity that she does for the pure reason of doing it, without any relationship to outcome or productivity, or the judgment of others. The bowls she makes are used in her apartment, are in the cabinet with the other bowls, are ordinary and slightly uneven and entirely hers. The class is also simply pleasant. The teacher is a patient woman named Rosa, who has been doing this for 30 years, and who has the particular quality of someone whose relationship to their craft is long and settled. Not passionate in a demonstrative way, but deeply, quietly committed, the way you are committed to something that has become part of the structure of your days. The other students are a range of people, a few of them women like Constance, in their 30s or 40s, working people with the Wednesday evening free and the desire to put their hands in clay. They talk, not about work. Not about... The church is a solid red brick building in her neighbourhood, the kind of church that is more than a building. It is a community centre and a social network and a mutual aid system and a place of genuine spiritual life all at once, and Dolores is involved in all of these aspects of it. She's on the Women's Auxiliary Committee. She helps organise the annual rummage sale. She is, 3 times a year, one of the women who prepares the church dinner for the elderly congregation members who live alone. The cooking done on Saturday afternoon, the delivery made on Sunday, the particular form of care that involves showing up with a pot of soup and staying long enough to make sure the pot is received by someone who has been seen by another human being for at least 10 minutes. She does this work with the same practical directness she brings to everything. She is not performing virtue. She is doing what she believes needs doing in the way it needs to be done and then going home. But the church is also, in the deeper sense, a place of rest for her. Not rest in the physical sense. Sunday mornings are not restful physically. They involve just the city and the weather and her own body moving through both. She walks through neighbourhoods she knows and ones she does not. She looks at things, really looks, at the facades of buildings, at the gardens behind the fences, at the people sitting on front steps in the October afternoon, at the quality of the light on brick. She is a teacher. She teaches children to pay attention. The Sunday walk is where she practices paying attention herself. Paying attention without an agenda, without the purposefulness that teaching requires, just the bare attention of a person who is curious about the world. She walks for 2 or 3 hours. She comes home tired and slightly illuminated. She sits down and marks her papers, but the walk is there, in her, for the rest of the day. The city she walked through, the things she looked at, the particular quality of the afternoon light, they are there, quietly, behind everything else. Helen. On the days when she's not working, walks along the lakeshore. She does this regardless of weather. October along the lake can be spectacular. The light on the water, the sky enormous, the feeling of standing at the edge of something vast and indifferent and beautiful. She has been walking this shore for the 15 years she's lived in the city, and the shore has been, in some way, her continuous companion. The thing that does not change even when everything else does. She stands at the water's edge. The lake says nothing. This is the thing she values most about the lake. It is entirely without comment on her life, her choices, her body, her career, her age. It is water and light and the sound of its own motion and nothing else. She stands here for as long as she needs. Then she turns and goes home. These are the restorative hours, small, ordinary, individually unremarkable. Collectively, everything. The capacity to do the work, to endure the standing and the navigation and the undervaluation and the double shift and all of it. This capacity is replenished here, in the Art Institute and the pottery class and the church and the Sunday walk and the hour at the lake. In the private, restorative hours that are not about the work but that make the work possible, let this register, let it rest in you. The painting by the window, the lopsided bowl, the sound of the choir, the long walk through the neighbourhood, the lake. These are not footnotes to the story, these are the story. Breathe in, let them settle. Breathe out. You are resting now, you are in the restorative hours. Let them do their work. And so, we let the night have this. We let the curtain fall on the 14th floor, the linoleum, the underwood, the memos and the phone calls and the careful calibrations. We let the mill go quiet. We let the ward rest in its particular late-night stillness, the monitors soft, the corridor empty, the sound of careful footsteps moving through the dark with knowledge and intention. We let the kitchen tables hold their silence. We let the city, great and complex and indifferent and full of lives, do its overnight work of being what it is, lit and breathing, turning on its axis, full of sleeping women who will rise in the morning and do what they have always done. The work continues. The world turns. And in this room, in this quiet, there is nothing left to do, nothing left to solve, nothing left to carry, only the breath, in and out. The sound of the city, far away, the dark behind the curtains, a body at rest, a mind growing still, still, still. Thank you so much for watching. If you'd like to see more videos like this, please consider leaving a like and subscribing to the channel, as it really helps us continue making more content. Anyways, see you in the next one.